How's everybody doing today? This is Anthony from the Basement Reef. If this is your first time tuning into our channel, we're a retail aquatic pet store and houseplant shop located in Columbia, Missouri. And here on this channel, we feature all sorts of things related to both of those hobbies. And today, we're here to talk about this terrarium. We set this up back when we first opened the store. And there's a number of things that have worked well with it, but also some that have gone wrong. So we're gonna completely redo it. I'm excited about this because we've been meaning to get some more houseplant content on this channel, and this is a good way to do it. I have lots of cool things lined up for this build, so let's get started.
Like I said, we set this terrarium up when we first opened the store, so just over a year ago. And it's not that it looks bad, or the plants haven't grown. They have. It's just that it's not quite what we wanted it to be, and it used to have a water feature that since completely failed. This pothos is probably the most successful plant in there. It started as just a node, and has since popped off more than a leaf a month. Pretty cool, right? The other plant that's managed to push off pretty good growth the whole time is this Fittonia, or nerve plant. I never get tired of looking at the intricate patterns on its leaves. This Florida Beauty Dracaena is pretty cool too. They're not the easiest to keep alive, so it's neat that it's hung on in here. This here is the failed water feature. It used to be a waterfall all the way on the right, and then hit a river that ran right to left through the whole terrarium before dropping back below. Like I said though, it doesn't work anymore. We set this up in a pretty traditional waterfall style, with expanded clay balls on the bottom, and then some mesh before the substrate. This caused some problems though. We'll get to that.
And that takes us to where we are today. It's time to reimagine this terrarium and get it back to what it needs to be. There's a few things we're going to be using today to make this thing really pop. First are these various stalagmatellas. This is going to make for a beautiful ground cover and really benefit from the humidity that this terrarium holds. After that, we're going to work with some of this vertical space and even include a bromeliad and an orchid in this build. I'm really excited, so let's get started. The first thing we're obviously going to have to do is tear down this old build.
I'm starting by removing all of the old Hardscape materials. We might reuse some, but I'm not sure which. After that, I'm carefully going to remove all of the plants. Some of these are definitely going back in the terrarium too, the pothos and the Fittonia, to be sure. Damaging their roots here is going to be inevitable, but I want to keep that to a minimum, so again, careful is key. Here you can see a little more about how the old waterfall worked. The pump was hidden behind this foam insert. We're going to ditch it because I don't like it too much anymore. We put this mesh around the pump to try and protect it, but it wasn't terribly successful. We'll try something different this time. I forgot that we put these string of turtles in there. I'll have to keep that in mind. Now it's time to pull out all the old dirt. Again, you can see here how this mesh supported all of the substrate, and the hydro ball sat underneath. You can also see that the substrate we used last time compacted really badly. That's another thing we're going to have to address this time around. Now we can dump out all of those clay balls. I'm going to be saving them, but not using them for the same purpose this time around. Now, a quick sweep, and shine the glass, and we're just about ready to start this again.
So now that we're back to a clean slate, let's talk a little bit about why we think our last water feature failed. Essentially, the entire bottom of the tank here acted as the reservoir, and it did double duty, also serving to water the terrarium. The problem with that, though, is that it would frequently get clogged up as little pieces of dirt or pebbles would wash out from our soil, and the whole thing would flood, and the pump would dry up, and it wouldn't do anything it was supposed to do. Our solution today is essentially to cheat it a little bit. We're not going to use the whole bottom of the terrarium as our reservoir again. Instead, we have this little container, and we're going to try and keep the water feature completely self-contained and then hardscape around it so that you can't even tell that this is here. The rest of the terrarium, where the soil is going to go, won't be connected to this at all. So it's not going to be self-watering anymore, but I think the trade-off here is more than worth it. If our water feature can function without us having to address it multiple times a day to keep it running, it's going to be much better for us.
This piece of lace rock is sort of the key to this water feature today. This hole is in the perfect position that allows us to pass the pump through it and cover up most of our reservoir. After that, we just need to hardscape around it, carefully making sure everything angles back towards where we want the water to flow. We can test it with a little bit of water and see that we're almost there. I want this to just sort of bubble up and fall back down, not a waterfall in a river like before. So we're going to clip the hose really close to where it comes out. Now it's time to plug in the pump and see this water feature in action. Or maybe not. Looks like this old pump is seized. We'll have to grab a new one, but in the meantime, we won't let that deter us. We can move on to the rest of the terrarium. Remember how I said that old substrate was compacted? You can see it again here. I don't think we were too far off though, and the plants grew in it, so we'll use that as a base. Here I am breaking up all those chunks to get it as loose as we can to start with. This is sphagnum moss. It's going to allow us to hold more moisture. And this is orchid bark. That's to help with the compaction. It's simply going to take up space. Same with the expanded clay balls. I said we were using them differently this time. Now, one good mix, and we're finally ready to start rebuilding the terrarium. Here I want to show you guys some secret tech. I want some height on the left side of the terrarium, but it's all going to be hardscape. Rather than stacking substrate all the way up that high, we use some little pieces of styrofoam, stacked up roughly in the shape that we want. This will be much easier, much sturdier, and allow us to use a lot less substrate. What I have in mind over here is kind of a cliff with a fallen tree. Now, I'm not the greatest at this stuff, so it's not going to look exactly like that, but that's sort of my inspiration here. I'm carefully going to stack this petrified wood. I selected it because it kind of has that natural cliffscape look to it. You'll want to play around with this a little bit until you get something that looks natural. There's some things that can help, like the rule of thirds, but if you're anything like me, you'll just want to mess around with it a little bit until you get something that looks right. Now we add our fallen tree. Works for me. Now before you start planting, wet the substrate a little bit. You don't want to plant into dry soil. The first thing we'll be planting today are those selaginellas I mentioned earlier. They're a type of spike moss, and I like them because they kind of look like a fern. They can be a little difficult outside of terrariums because they like it super moist and pretty shaded, but this terrarium is going to stay plenty humid, and putting them at the base of the hardscape like this should block just enough light out. Again, I'm no expert at this stuff, but I think that they do a really good job of helping the foreground meet up to the hardscape and look like something you might find in nature. After that, we'll add the pothos. We'll place it similarly to how it was before. Now, before we do anything else, we want to sort of lay out the water feature again, just so we know where things are placed. Over here, I think we'll go with that Photonia from before. I want to reuse as many of the plants as possible. Now, a few more selaginellas to really kind of meet up that hardscape to the foreground on the other side, and we're just about done for today. One last plant I want to reuse from before is this maidenhair fern. It'll like it in here, and they're kind of hard to keep, so I'm proud that this one's even alive. Remember that one string of turtles before? That's because we were trying to grow a carpet of those last time. We'll try that again. It should be pretty cool if it works. And that's where we'll stop for today. This sort of looks like I wanted. Not exactly a cliff with a fallen tree, but it's reminiscent of something out of nature. Once we get the water feature working, we can finish up the rest of the hardscape too. Remember, this thing is going to go vertical and up and out of the terrarium entirely. So you have that to look forward to.
And that takes us to the end of part 1 of our terrarium video today. It may not be finished, and it may have caught us off guard that pump wasn't functioning, but we'll go grab a new one overnight tonight, and then tomorrow we're going to record everything there is to know about getting a water feature going, finish this terrarium, and get that video up by the end of this week too. So, in the meantime, make sure that you subscribe to our channel so you can get notified when that video is up. As always, this is Anthony from the Basement Reef, and thank you so much for watching today.